What problems are troubling you? What's frustrating you, bothering you, worrying you? Want solutions? Want answers? Welcome to Here We Come to Save the Day, hosted by David Adelson. This podcast is dedicated to solving everyday and global problems in an uplifting, fun, enjoyable way. There is a solution to whatever's troubling you. Ask your questions and we'll do our best to give you practical, useful, workable solutions you can use starting today. Join us now with David's special guest experts who will share their own experiences, life lessons, and practical strategies for creating the life you long for. Start living your best life today, right now, with David Adelson and friends.
Welcome to Here We Come to Save the Day. I am with Justin Womack, and he's got some exciting information for you about permission to be who you really want to be, permission to be who you are. And I'll let Justin tell you in a brief synopsis of what we're going to be talking about today, and then we'll go into who Justin is and go into more detail about how you too can step up to be who you want to be and lead a much more fulfilling life than you've been leading. So Justin, go ahead.
So I'm
Justin, welcome, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Justin Womack, just to introduce myself. And I think the problem is that a lot of people I've come across, myself included, have this situation where as children, we know that we're meant for like big things. We know that we have lofty goals. We go for like exactly what we have dreams that we want to accomplish. Through our conditioning, through our social pressures, through whatever it is, those things kind of go away, and we usually enter kind of a scarcity mindset, and we are conditioned to go for comfort versus stepping outside of our comfort zones. And what happens is we end up working I'm going to say, quote, safer careers. I mean, given the circumstances of today, they're not always safer, is the reality. But we follow these more traditional paths. We get better jobs. We do what we don't want to do because we think that we're doing the right thing for the long term. There's a better way to that. And, for me, it took a massive, I'll call it a metaphor, but I mean, it wasn't not a true metaphor, but a car accident story, which I'll share a little later, to transition out of that, break free from that kind of hamster wheel of running around in a circle and going nowhere with my life to where I've been able to take it now. So I think the problem is that people get trapped. They're afraid to step out of that comfort zone because they don't know what's going to happen. And the reality is when they can actually do it and break free, they're going to be so much happier and then be so much more fulfilled.
So thank you. I want to really introduce you now officially, now that you've given that teaser about what we're going to cover today. Justin Womack is a digital marketing specialist, a copywriter, a speaker, and co-host of the podcast Marketing Geeks. His journey from working behind the scenes to running his own business fast-tracked after a near-fatal accident where his car rolled upside down underwater, and he spent 2 years in ICU as part of the recovery.
2 months.
2 months. 2 years would have been too long. All right, yeah. 2 months it's still a long time when somebody's in that situation. Thank you for correcting me, Justin. Since the accident, he started his own company, JMac Media. He's spoken for organizations like Mark and McLennan and AIG, and launched the Marketing Geeks podcast, which has featured past guests including Pat Flynn, Dan Locke, and John Lee Dumas. So we know you're real. Thank you. And let's get into this now a little bit. What was your life like before? What was the dominating trait before the accident?
I mean, I want to say, I don't know if this is the dominating trait, but the underlying trait was fear. I was afraid to be authentic. I was afraid to express my true self. I was afraid to put myself out there to the point where even on like social media websites, I didn't want to put a picture up. I mean, that's how serious it kind of got for me. And I was afraid to take risks. So I think, again, like I've talked about, like as a kid, I wanted, bigger things. I was like interested in becoming an actor or like a star or like, millionaire status and becoming this, becoming someone that as a child felt, someone important in the future, according to those guidelines as a child. And what ended up happening is I just kind of cruised. I found myself kind of falling into a pattern of like drifting. And I ended up just working a corporate career that paid, that paid well. I made decent money, not great money, but decent money. And I was miserable. Every single day I was trapped in a cubicle working, and I would come home worse than the next, every day was like worse than the day before. If you've ever seen the movie Office Space, that's a great metaphor for what I felt. Um, and so I think the underlying trait though was that I was living a life of fear, and I was afraid to, again, I was afraid to show the world who I truly was, because I didn't know how they would react, and I didn't trust myself to not mess it all up. And so I was coming from that scarcity standpoint and fear standpoint.
So what changed? So I don't know if we need, how much of the details we need to go into the accident itself. I know you and I have talked about it in more detail. Why don't you give whatever you feel people need to know, and then we want to explore, what happened when you were in recovery in ICU, and what changed afterwards, how you noticed the changes. And again, we want to help the people who are listening. So how can they, and we don't want to advise them to go out and have a life-threatening anything. No. We want them to sidestep that. And effectively, we want to give them permission today to step up to be who they really are. So tell us a little bit in your own words about the accident, whatever you feel they need to know. And then tell us about the recovery, and especially not just the physical recovery, Justin, but the recovery in terms of leaving that fear behind and then stepping into your own space.
So a couple things. So heading into the accident, I had started to make a bit of a mental transition. I had started to attend a few seminars. I'd started to learn about like NLP and some personal growth workshops. And I was doing that kind of as a side thing. So at some point before the accident, I had kind of made a start to this mental shift and laid a little bit of groundwork. The accident, like, to me, is like, I mean, if you're going to, it's like a metaphor. And it really, like I said, it really happened to me, but it's almost like a metaphor that my life was on the wrong path, and I just got, I got hit really hard by life and forced into a different direction because it wasn't in alignment with who I was. And I was almost forced into this other path. And this is the path I was destined or designed to be on. So, I mean, to talk about this, I guess I want to bring up a couple points. One, I shouldn't be here. The accident was, it was so severe that when I was underwater and nearly drowned, it was dirty water. So I developed what's called ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome, where my lungs were hardening to like cardboard, and they were growing fungus on them from the dirty water. And that's what led to my extended stay in the ICU. Now, the other element of this is that I was knocked unconscious while I was underwater, and I was actually rescued by a bystander that witnessed this and dove in after me and pulled me out of the car, which is just kind of like this incredible other story that helped to bring me to a different level of humility as I became aware of this, as I came out of my medical coma and lay in my ICU bed. But it gave me like almost like a restored faith in like people and humanity, and like wow, like somebody risked their life to help me. I mean, that was there's nothing more humbling than that. I mean, to know that essentially there's no way I would have even made it this far, and that, even in the ICU, it was still kind of a long shot that I would survive after that point. But to even get to there, I had to be rescued by somebody. On top of that, another person that was nearby happened to be a off-duty lifeguard that helped to do CPR. So, I mean, like, there's like these synchronistic events that happened to kind of keep me on the planet. And it's pretty crazy to even talk about, like, just how many things had to go right that day to prevent me from passing away. I spent 30 days in a medical coma. At one point, my lungs collapsed. It got so bad, they brought in the priest to do a blessing, and it came very close to the end. So I had gotten into multiple organ failure and everything, and somehow I still pulled out of that. And I don't know how that happened. I just know that I did. A month after, when I came to, I still had I had a trach, so I couldn't speak, and I was in a hospital bed. With lots of swelling. I had 5 chest tubes connected to me, and I was unable to really move my body, tons of atrophy from being in a hospital bed, and that continued to get worse because I spent another month there. But I will tell you that sitting in a hospital bed without the ability to speak and without the ability to leave that bed felt very long. I mean, so it's almost apt that as we're recording this, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, and a lot of people are confined to their homes. It's like, wow, this is nothing for me now because I had to sit in a hospital bed where I couldn't leave the bed and couldn't speak for a month. That was much more challenging. This is light now. But it gave me so much time to sit and reflect and kind of just notice that life is really short. First of all, I shouldn't have even survived. And had I not survived, I would have had no opportunity to correct the things that I wanted to fix in my life. And it gave me this permission to kind of take risks that I had otherwise not been willing to do. Because again, it's like, I shouldn't have survived. I'm living a life I don't want to live in terms of employment and in terms of fulfillment. How can I do things differently? And so that was like a question that lingered in my mind for about a year, because it took about a year for me to rebuild my body. Even when I got out of the hospital, the atrophy was so bad I couldn't lift my arms over my head. I couldn't open a sliding glass door without help. It was bad. So it was extreme atrophy. My lungs were at a fraction of their capacity, and I had to again rebuild my lungs, rebuild my body, and that took time. But during that time, which is again something I think that people can employ given this current circumstances, depending on when this airs, is that we're in the middle of the COVID-19 where people are confined to their homes. But during the time when I was confined to my home, I spent it learning. Like all I did was I used that time to dive into training courses, to dive into personal development stuff, to dive into these things to grow professionally and personally. And I was able to take my circumstances and convert them into a source of motivation instead of a source of what I'll call like victimhood, because there's two approaches that people could take in these kind of circumstances. There's one, I could have said, poor me. I now have, my lungs are now a fraction of what they used to be. I'm having trouble walking. I'm struggling with this, and now I can apply for federal disability and live my life like that. Or I can take this and be like, wow, I want to show people that I can rebuild myself. I want to show people that this doesn't have to be the end. This can be the beginning. And I can use this as a transformative tool to really make that leap that I want to make. And that's the choice that I made internally, to really take responsibility for what had happened and use it as a source of inspiration. And I think that's kind of a framework that successful people operate from. I've studied a lot of like NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and I'm not saying you need to dive into the whole thing, but one of the tenets of it is that taking responsibility for whatever happens in your life is one of the cores to personal empowerment. And even when things are bad, just kind of not saying that you deserve something to happen to you, but knowing that we can't change what happened. All we can do is change how we respond to it. And and we have the ability to respond in a way that's going to create a better future for us, or we have the way to respond that's not going to do that. So those are kind of choices that I made. And, over the course of several years, just making good choices and compounding has been what's allowed me to make this shift, which has been to move from being a behind the scenes employee to being a kind of front of the group entrepreneur, now podcast host, now a CEO of a company, kind of making that transition. And I'm still a work in progress. I'm not even running a 7-figure company. But I've had some success along the way. I'm making more than I've ever made as an employee. And I've been able to I'm much more fulfilled than I've ever been. That doesn't mean I don't work more. I actually probably work more than I used to work, but it doesn't matter because I actually enjoy what I do. And that's the difference. And I think having that in my life has just been so transformational. So
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I know I know sometimes when you touch upon parts of this, it's a little painful for you, and I
Mhm.
appreciate your authenticity and you're showing yourself and who you are for the audience here. I want to, Justin, if it's okay, I really want to go to that pivotal point, and I don't know that it was a particular moment, but just this idea of when did you decide to not be a victim and decide to and give yourself permission to be who you are? Did that happen when you were still in ICU? I know you said you did a few things before in NLP and self-development. Do you feel that that prepared you to make that choice? Did it take a while when you were self-studying afterwards? What was I want to say that switch, that transition from, I think this is who I want to be going forward. Can we talk about that moment or however long it took?
Yeah, I can't pinpoint it to a single moment. I can say that I have, I've always had a kind of a chip on my shoulder at times, and I don't always exercise it, but I like to prove people wrong if things like that. And I was able to kind of tap into that kind of emotion where it's funny because there's really probably nobody to prove wrong. It's just it's almost like a imaginary thing, but I was able to kind of tap into that, and it's something I used to tap into like in sports, in high school. Like I was a wrestler, a pitcher, a football player, um, and I was able to tap into that and kind of channel that as a way of, all right, I want to really push myself and create like an example of what's possible for somebody that survives ARDS, which is, again, the condition has, an 80% mortality rate, and it's actually one of the, with the current crisis, a lot of people that get COVID-19 end up developing ARDS now, and that's one of the things that's causing the mortality rate. Not a lot of people, but a percentage of people. I should be clear on that. Not a lot, but that when the people that are struggling get it. The big transition, I guess, again, was kind of like reflecting. I mean, I just remember being in the hospital bed and just feeling so helpless and feeling like, one, I didn't know if I was even ever going to come out of there and be the same, like be able to walk like the way I walked and have the strength I had. I didn't know. I mean, I was told I'd be able to talk again, but having a trach and not being able to speak, it didn't feel like I was going to be able to talk again. Um, it felt like all these things that I had taken for granted, I was feeling all these things I had taken for granted. I couldn't drink water. And I was constantly wanting water and craving water, uh, and being deprived of all these things. It put me in a state again, I mean, as of humility, and it made me, somehow it triggered a sense of like hunger, like if I get out of this, when I get out of this, like I I have to be successful. And then also on top of this, I'm going to mention that I was rescued. So I can't tell you how many people have come to me and been like, wow, you are here for a reason. Like there's a reason you survived. You need to do this. Like you need to do something with your life now. I mean, like, and they don't verbiage it that way, but that's what I hear, because it's like, you're here for a reason. Now, I don't know what that reason is, but you need, like, your life is here for a reason. So there's some internal pressure that builds from that. Like, you're right. Somebody saved my life. I wouldn't have been here without them. And I have a responsibility to do something different. The thing that I think made the biggest leap for me came about a year after the accident, when I attended it was an NLP workshop, but a speaker-based NLP workshop that really pushed me to tackle, something that had been difficult for me. I had taken Toastmaster classes. I had done some things to try to learn public speaking and take that on, but I came to this with a different mindset. And I feel like, like that 5-day training, I think I made like the biggest personal development leap I'd ever made in my life. And it made me excited, and it drove me to really start, producing content, booking speaking gigs, going around my local area and volunteering, like, and speaking everywhere I could. And it challenged me to just kind of like take on this role of what I knew had to be done to achieve what I wanted. And a lot of that was, I have to be willing to do what I was not previously willing to do. And I have to often act against my natural instincts to do it. So I don't know how coherent this whole story has been, but it's, I mean, those are like the things that pop out to me when you ask that question.
Yeah, no, this is very good, and I appreciate this. I want to take a minute, and because we're talking about this and what our purpose is and everything, we have a quiz that people can take to find out how aligned they are with their purpose, and they can just go to takethisquiznow.com, and it's a short, quick, fun quiz, and then they'll give some information to help people follow through and decide what they want to do with their life. I know the truth is we're all here for a reason. It's just that most of us, just as you said, Justin, we get it trained out of us somehow or other as little kids. I know several years ago, I was with a group of thought leaders, and we did a clearing for them. And the phrase that we use is, we want to remind you of who you are and what you're here to do, which you knew when you were young, when you knew that Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy were real. And superpowers were real. There's, we all come in knowing certain things, and then we get distracted, by the economics of the situation, by the power grid of, you're a child, your job is to, listen and not speak up, and no, you didn't have that experience, and it wasn't a gorilla in your bedroom last night, or whatever they tell you. And I think a lot of us go around spending a lot of time, maybe on a quiet level, maybe I'm here to do something not so pronounced as what you are, but maybe feeling like maybe I should be doing something, but I don't quite know what it is. And then, and I'm getting to a very particular question here, because you said you did things that were against your nature to do. So the question, what I want to explore a little bit is, someone's here and deep in their heart or in the back of their mind, they feel like they're here to do something, but they don't quite know what it is. And the criteria that they're using is, if I'm here to do something, it should be natural and it should be comfortable, when in fact that may not be the case at all, which is what you're describing. Can you comment on that a little bit in a way that might help our audience?
Yes. I mean, you talked about going back to being a little kid. As a little kid, I had no fear of public speaking. I had no fear of the things that I'm doing now, but it got so ingrained out of me that I'm having to relearn those skills. So when I'm saying I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone as an adult with limiting beliefs that were ingrained over decades of time. I think that's the mindset that to approach this from, is that, it's, what you think is your natural instincts really aren't. I mean, there are layers, there are layers of limiting beliefs that are on top of that have been built up over time. If you're struggling to put yourself out there, there's something underneath that's causing it, and it's not your natural self. For me, I had so many things that I made up excuses on why I couldn't start a podcast, or couldn't do a Facebook Live, or couldn't create content. And a lot of them were like people in my life that I was like afraid of how they would react to it. And when I finally did it, there was like zero reaction. Most of them didn't even see it. And it's funny, because I was able to build up this story in my mind that like I made this like huge mountain I had to overcome to put out my first piece of content. And then when I did it, it was like nothing. And so I think, the point of that is, like, oftentimes we create self-imposed limitations that aren't even real. And when we step out of our comfort zone and we keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, they can be overcome. And when we do overcome those limiting beliefs, and we do overcome our fears, it on the other side of that is much more fulfillment and happiness. And I think that's the best way I can express that, because I get it. It is kind of weird. Like I want to be in alignment. My alignment says I don't want to do a video, But really, I do. I mean, if I really think deeper at it, I do want to get my message out to people. I do want to share my gifts with the world. I do want to, I do want to serve communities. And so, in order to do that, I have to leverage the technology and mediums that allow it to happen. And if that's in alignment with me, that I want to do that, then what's stopping me from doing it? And is it me personally? Because am I being a little bit? I mean, I'm not. Like, is it a little bit selfish of me because it's like a personal fear or a limiting belief, and something that I can work on and overcome, or I mean, for some people maybe there is an alignment thing where it really is like my core self communicates through certain mediums, and maybe video is not one of them, or maybe you're better auditory, maybe podcasting would be one for you, or maybe you're a better or maybe you like to write and maybe the book is the best medium. So that might be the case for some people, but for a lot of us, I believe that it's in our heads, and it's mostly self-imposed through years of indoctrination into beliefs that really are not our own.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. So how do you get rid of them? Because there is that thing of alignment versus woulda, shoulda, coulda, what can I do, all this. I tend to agree with you that a lot of people, and that I think is the crux of what we want to do, is again, give permission to people. And everybody who's listening, you have permission to be who you are. You have permission to express yourself as who you are. And when you listen to your heart and you think about it, it may not be who you've been expressing. It may not be doing what you've been doing. And what we're encouraging you to do is to explore that deeper value within you, and then listen, just as Justin's talking about, is this mountain that I'm feeling that I have to overcome, is it real? Is it, there's a whole thing, and I'm not that familiar with her work, but I know that Byron Katie does it. The first thing to ask is the belief that you're believing, is it real? And if it's not, that alone is, step one of helping get rid of it. I know you did, the NLP. I know you did some other, I don't know if you did other techniques. I know some people use like meditation or TM or some of these other things. What do you find, what do you feel, aside from your own courage and bravery and willingness? And I think a key point of this is having a strong intention that I'm just going to do this. As you said, I'm going to prove other people wrong, but it doesn't have to be proving other people wrong as much as I'm going to do this for me. Aside from that very clear intention, and I encourage people to make that, what are the tools that you can suggest people to help overcome their limiting beliefs or their erroneous programming or whatever it might be that's stopping them?
Yeah. I've probably done everything, but there's been a lot of tools that I think, it's tough to know which ones worked, which ones didn't, which ones made a big impact. I think all of them make some impact. But I've done, I've done psychotherapy, which has been like talk therapy. I've done like EMDR. I've done hypnosis, NLP, Reiki, acupuncture, you name it, meditation, mindfulness. I've explored several modalities, and I think all of them have certain value centers. EFT tapping. I mean, I've tried, which that one, like for some people, they swear by it. That one, it didn't work for me necessarily, or at least it didn't have a noticeable impact, but that doesn't always mean it didn't work. It just means it wasn't a noticeable impact for me. I think the one that really helped was being in more like talk therapy in like a group setting, kind of like group support groups, and sharing like deeper things that are not normally spoken of. So revealing secrets that are that you might feel. I mean, and we're not things that like you don't normally share with people, and starting to do that. And what I found is that the more I did that, the more I felt connected to people. Um, and the more it opened up my own ability to continue sharing more stories like that, because I got to experience people's reactions to it. And if you trust somebody to do that, and you're able to do it, and you're able to kind of experience that, wow, the reaction wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It made a big difference for me. So that's the one I
Yeah.
can think of.
So, and I can see how that makes a lot of sense, because we do spend a lot of time thinking that, oh, if my wife, my kids, my friends, my parents knew I thought this, I believed this, if they knew that about me, that they would stop liking me, they would stop loving me and everything. Are you comfortable giving us some example of something that you shared and then was surprised at the either lack of reaction or the supporting reaction from it? Again, my feeling is that when we give people permission to be who they are, the first thing is that even you should stop passing judgment on yourself, but you should also not judge the people's response when you say something. You know, a lot of the great thinkers and the leaders throughout time and the developers, you know, the guy who taught us all that we should wash our hands before helping give birth to a baby, people thought, you know, all his peers thought, you know, oh my God, this guy's nuts, you know? So can you, and again, I'm not looking to embarrass you, Justin, so if you're not comfortable, we don't need to do this, but anything you want to say here?
I don't think so right now. But the reason, again, the one I want to express is that part of what works for this, and part of what I think a lot of people will struggle with, is when you share this, I think it's important to do it in like an intimate setting with people that you trust, and it doesn't need to be broadcast.
Like this.
Well, I mean, and I'm just making an example, but the point, what I'm saying is, like, because a lot of people, they're not gonna, these things are not, I mean, sometimes they do come out, and then, you know, you're like, okay, well, this reaction was awesome, and now I want to tell the entire world what happened, and there is a point to that, and I've talked to several coaches that will use, one of the analogies I love, actually, that I've heard before is the more personal sometimes a story can get, and the more like in detail, the more universal the message is, because people relate to it. I guess I'm still not quite prepared to go there.
That's okay.
But again, it's, yeah, for me, it's in a smaller setting, more intimate setting right now, and that might change over time. But that's where it starts, and I think that's the message I want to say: is start there. Eventually, it may graduate into that, where, you know, I'm doing stages and talking about the things I don't want to talk about, but I don't want to do that right now. So
Yeah, and no, and that's fine. And in the work that I do with clients, sometime, or just meeting with friends, when they say something that they just say, well, don't tell anybody, and I say, oh, I was going to take out a full page ad in the Times, you know.
Yeah.
And I get that there are, and I appreciate your response here, because it also gives people permission that if you're not comfortable, if you're not in a position where you feel safe to share something, honor that also. You know, don't share it in that situation, because you know, there's nothing worse than presenting your great idea to save the world to somebody who doesn't support you and who shoots you down at that very innocent and new state, when you're just kind of, I just want to feel, if I present this to the world, if I present this aspect of me, or if I present this idea, how is the environment going to react? And then to have someone say, oh, you know what, that's a great idea, but you know who would be good at it is this other person, you know. And that can really undermine your own self-confidence. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate your emphasizing by example that you want to be with somebody who, you know, get permission to share with the person that you want to share, permission for them to not pass judgment, for permission for you to share it, for permission for it to be received and not judged. And then in that small, intimate setting, start exploring, allowing yourself to be who you are, allowing yourself. And we're not talking about, what your sexual preferences are. We're talking about, the deep-seated beliefs of what you feel you're here to express in your life. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I think one of the things you kind of touched on there is that there will be naysayers, and there will be people that make it harder sometimes. I mean, they do exist. It will happen from time to time. It doesn't have to happen. It may not happen. I guess I should say it may not, but it's possible that you'll have like a troll or someone like that says something negative. And for people that are sensitive like myself, one negative comment has the impact of 10 positive comments. so it can set me back. And so I have to be, one of the tenets that I've been able to follow is like, I have to be relentless in pursuit of my goals and continue at all costs. And so for me, like if I'm taking this on, I have to be willing to be bad at it. I have to be willing to be bad at it for an extended period of time until I'm good at it. I have to be willing to continue in spite of adversity. And I have to be willing to continue no matter what. I mean, that's like, I've had a lot of reasons to quit doing my path as an entrepreneur. I've had a lot of reasons that have made it like, who knows if I'll be able to pay my bills in the past. But, I weathered the storm, and I pushed through and I pushed through and I pushed through. And I'm even in spite of the circumstances, I'm pacing to have my best year ever as an entrepreneur. Even this month, I've actually done more business than I've ever done in my entire business during the crisis. I do run an internet marketing company. It's not an industry that's been as affected as other industries. I don't have, closures, and I work digitally. So I have unique circumstances, but like the reality, it's just trying to verbiage this correctly. I've been able to kind of do that because I was able to endure challenging times in the past, and I was able, including surviving an accident and being in ICU, and all these life experiences have kind of compounded and helped me become stronger and be able to respond to something like this, and sometimes help other people to stand when they're not ready to do it themselves. So another thing I love hearing is like, sometimes like for a coach, and I work with a lot of coaches. I'm not currently doing coaching. I've done it a little bit in the past. I'm focused on the marketing side, but I market for a lot of coaches. But one of the things I love hearing is that, a good coach is willing to stand for somebody's transformation before they're willing to stand for themselves. And I believe that's very true. And so I see that over and over again. And I see that there's a lot of need right now for people to get that kind of support, and for somebody else to stand up for them while they're struggling, so that they can later stand for themselves when the economy picks back up and things resume to a more normalcy level.
So thank you for saying that. And that brings up one of the good action steps that people can do is get a coach that supports you in becoming who you are. As you mentioned, a really good coach sees you way better and way further along than you see yourself, and they're going to help you, climb the ladder. I want to bring up this thing about that you mentioned, one person saying a negative comment, and I totally understand that. When you're on stage and there's 300 people in the audience and one gets up and leaves, how many of us afterwards worry about the one person? And I think one of the mindset things that we need to work on is, I got to give this message to 299 people, and hopefully that had an impact on their lives, and not worry about the one person who may have had extenuating circumstances, and they probably didn't leave because of you being on stage. They probably left because they had to use the restroom or some family emergency or something that had nothing to do with us. And we need to learn to not personalize those people, and to recognize that if somebody's finding fault with us, that's kind of their problem. I know there's been a tendency that I hope is kind of falling off, is for people to feel the need to express hostility that they're feeling within, which is most often dissatisfaction with themselves, which is what we're looking to end in this, or help move people out of in this call. But they take out their frustration by finding fault with other people. And if we can recognize that that person who's shouting is actually asking for help, and maybe it's our job to help them, and maybe it's not our job, but we can at least send them love or send them some good wishes, that we don't need to feel that our rejection is a rejection of us, even if it's a rejection of our ideas. So part of the growth of standing for who you are is recognizing, who to listen to. Listen to the people who support you. Don't pay a lot of attention to the people who say no, because right now, one of the first things they're telling you with, the virus going around is wash your hands for 20 seconds. We're all grateful to the guy who stood outside of hospitals, literally stood outside of hospitals hundreds of years ago, telling people who were going in to get their babies delivered, wash your hands, have the doctor wash your hands, trying to hand out pamphlets to people who could read at that time, and who was laughed at and who was, not well appreciated at that time. And how many lives have been saved from that, And he just did some research. Infant mortality rates were ridiculous at that point. And then when he did that, he found that, oh my God, all these babies are living just by washing their hands.
And I don't know that story, but my hunch is that a lot of people thought he was crazy too.
Yeah, exactly.
And then years later, he's proven correct, and that's something that's been adopted by the entire world.
Exactly. So stand up for who you are, people. Know what you know. And, I love Justin's story of, he didn't jump off the cliff right away. I know people who do and who succeed. I want to ask, when you were fully recovered, did you go back to your cubicle job after the accident, or did you just move into your own thing during the recovery time, or how did that play out?
During the recovery time, like I mentioned, I did a lot of studying. At first, I didn't quite know exactly what I wanted to do. I kind of did, but I still had that mindset that I needed more of a secure job. So while I was kind of studying marketing and business, which are my passions, I was also taking on computer engineering on the side, or not engineering, networking on the side. Because I'm this is more of here's something that I'm knowledgeable in computers, and I could do a career change, but get a more secure position doing, I was thinking career change also, and giving myself a backup plan in that regard. And I actually got a job for a period that lasted about 3 months doing computer networking work. And so I was able to just if I set my mind to something, I'm usually able to kind of get started and break into an industry, at least get on the ground floor. And I was able to do that. But I quickly realized I had no passion. And at one point, I felt that I was wrongly talked to for something that I wasn't doing. And I don't know what it was, but because I felt more of a sense of freedom, I just said, you know what, that's it, I'm out of here. And I quit. The first time I'd ever quit a job, because I just knew something else was going to be better, and I knew I was going to find a way to make it work. And so I did, and that's when I went full into the entrepreneur side. And the thing is, I did get help. I come from a relatively upper middle class family, so there was help along the way. I didn't have to survive and grind out rent during my recovery period and those kind of things. And I, at the time, my wife now, but at the time my girlfriend, was also helping to support through the covering the rent, things like that. So I had help, which I'm very fortunate for. Not everybody does, but I was able to take it and turn it into something. And that's also, that's all I can say is when those resources are presented to you, make the most of them, because they won't be there forever. And I was able to do something with it.
Very good. Justin, I want to thank you for sharing your intimate story with us. I think it's inspiring. I think there are so many examples, even in the last little bit that you covered, that can really help people position themselves and move forward. And really start to own that hidden aspect of themselves, which, as we talked about, they knew when they were young, and to allow that to start to emerge into, kind of butterfly from what they've been doing. I appreciate everything you've said. Do you have some resource or something that you want to share with people, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share this. It's loosely connected. It's connected. But so I mean, first of all, I run a digital marketing agency. I do copywriting, which means like writing persuasive style emails, sales letters, and website words. And so the resource on my website it's called an authority building checklist, and it's a way that you can kind of create authority in your industry, meaning that you're viewed in a higher level of prestige and credibility, and do it quicker. And for a lot of people, especially young people, they need to kind of leverage these techniques to be taken seriously, because the general perception in the past, I mean, it's changing a little bit now, but in the past, it's always been, if you're younger, you're not as knowledgeable. So kind of following these kind of authority building shortcuts that I have can kind of get you looked at in a level of the competency that you actually deserve. and the same thing goes for a lot of people that just don't have they haven't built out the lengthy resume. So it's like, how can we still be viewed as credible in our industry without the the decade long experience kind of thing. And so that kind of outlines some of the things that I've learned along my journey on how you can kind of position your business and position your brand, position yourself to be seen with that higher level of prestige.
Cool. So this will be in the show notes too, but what's the URL?
Yeah, so my website is jmackmedia, and I'm going to spell it jmackmedia.com/authority for this.
Cool. Justin, thank you so much. I'm so grateful we had that conversation at lunch at New Media Summit.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for you being here. I think your story is very inspiring, and I think it will help people and help them save the day and become more of who they want to be. You've given permission to just start to explore. You've suggested many tools that they can use, and you've even given them with your own offer at the end, how to turn that into something that's marketable very quickly. So thank you for your help, and thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to another helpful, fun, and life-changing episode of Here We Come to Save the Day with David Adelson. To access the show notes and additional resources, go to herewecometosavetheday.com. If you've enjoyed the show and find it helpful and fun, please leave us a review and share with a friend. Tell us issues troubling you or questions you have. We're here to help you. That's what Here We Come to Save the Day is all about. Till next time.